So you're at home and you're tickling the baby. What are you doing when you're tickling the baby? Well, you're making the baby laugh. Okay, that's one way. You're playing with the baby. Okay, so fine. That's a subset of the activity play with baby. And you can play peekaboo with the baby, you can tickle the baby, you can clean the baby. And all of that can be part of playing. And you might say, well, what are you doing when you're playing with a baby? And you'd say, well, I'm taking care of my family. And fine, and then you think, well, what are you doing when you're taking care of your family? And you might say, well, I'm being a good parent. And then you might say, well, what am I doing when I'm being a good parent? You might say, well, I'm being a good person. And then you could say, well, why should you be a good person? But we won't go any farther than that. It's because you can see that that's sort of in some sense, that's an ultimate level of abstraction. Okay, so you could, what do you do? Someone comes up to you and you're tickling the baby and you say, well, I'm being a good person. They ask, what are you doing? I'm being a good person. It's like, it's a bit disjointed. It isn't what the person would expect as an answer. They'd expect something more local, but it's still true. And so what's interesting is that when you're doing something that's, well, I would say worthwhile. That's probably the right way of thinking about it. You're doing a whole bunch of things simultaneously. And you're not really aware of all those things, but you are in some sense, you know, because if someone might come along and say, well, what kind of idiot tickles a baby like that? It's like, well, what have they said? Well, they've kind of nailed you here down on the micro tickle level, but they're sort of also taking a pretty good crack at this high level system as well. Now, and that's a problem. So let's say, well, good parent is a subset of being a good person, but there's all sorts of other. Maybe you have to be a good partner. Maybe you have to be a good daughter. Maybe you have to be a good niece. You know, your ability to function as a good person is composed of a very large number of hierarchically nested subsystems. And so when the person goes, only an idiot would tickle the baby like that, and they go after that, you might think, well, how upset should you get? And the answer is, well, how valid do you think their complaint is? So let's say maybe only an idiot would tickle a baby like that, and you happen to be that idiot. And so, well, maybe you're not a good person. And so what does that mean? It means that the map that consists of all these nested subsystems has now become unreliable. And so how upset are you going to get about that? Well, you know, maybe you had a bad day at work and you're kind of hypoglycemic and you had too much to drink the night before, and so someone says, you know, that's not how you tickle a baby, you idiot, and you cry. Well, why? Well, it's a pretty high level blow. And so it's the sort of thing you want to do if you want to hurt someone. It's not a good way to teach someone, because you teach them down at the smallest possible level, the micro. No, you don't tickle a baby like that. You tickle a baby like this. And you're doing a good job on everything else, but if you're going to tickle a baby, this is how you go about it. And the person thinks, well, you know, I'm doing a fairly good job, but I've got this little thing I have to work on, and maybe I can manage it. And so that works, and that works. And you can have some sympathy for the person at the same time, because you might say, well, I used to tickle babies like an idiot too, but you know, it's fixable, and most of you is okay. And that's a nice thing to do when you're arguing with someone. You say, look, here's a bunch of things you're doing right that are related to this, that are important. Here's a small thing that maybe you could alter slightly and it would make me happy, and maybe I'll return the favor at some point. And they think, oh, well, maybe. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe. And then they practice doing it, and you can give them a pat on the head, and then you're both happy about that. That really works with people. It really works.